As African Americans began to purchase automobiles and take part in the developing American automobile culture, they were restricted by racial segregation in the United States. State laws required separate facilities for African Americans, and many motels and restaurants excluded them. For the Negro traveler, whether on business or pleasure, there was always trouble finding suitable accommodation in hotels and guest houses where he would be welcome.
In 1936, a World War I veteran by the name of Victor Green created a list of restaurants, hotels, and gas stations that served African Americans during their traveling journey.
Using the 1959 Negro Motorist Green Book, historian and Washington Informer Special Editions editor Dr. Shantella Sherman introduced his 2019 DTU Informer interns to Green's work. With 60 years of history separating the three of us from the locales of the guide, we set off from Atlanta en route to DC. Looking for those sites, the goal was to travel as young college students heading to any of a number of Southern HBCUs did in 1959 and chart the beauty, resilience, and business acumen of those listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book.
Unfortunately, many locations in the guides have since been razed. To our delight, though, we were able to find few lasting remains, including the historic Magnolia House in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the celebrated DC YMCA, now known as the Thurgood Marshall Center Trust.
To make the rubber meet the road, so to speak, we also took in the Green Book Interactive exhibit at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, where we captured first-hand experiences from visitors who had experienced travel along segregated interstates. We hope you enjoy our work.
Right, I was born in 1948, so I grew up in the early 1950s. And whenever my parents would leave North Carolina, my home state, to go to New York, we traveled through Virginia, DC, Maryland, Delaware, up to New York and New Jersey, and there was no place to stop along the highway. So the Green Book provided a valuable, not only places, but valuable contacts so that we could be safe. You know, a journey back in those days was not only a journey for pleasure, but was a journey for safety.
The African American community was not able to stay in the white hotels. In this case, in Greensboro, we're talking about hotels called the King Cotton, the Old Henry Hotel, okay, and there were a few more. A hotel for blacks, okay. Of course, she consented. They bought this house, and they called it the Magnolia House Motel.
Yes, well, back in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, Washington, D.C. was very segregated. So even some of the writers from the Harlem Renaissance would come here, James Baldwin himself, there was no place to stay, so they stayed here. And Thurgood Marshall himself did the research for the famous 1954 Brown decision. He did a lot of research here at this building, because even Thurgood Marshall, as a famous civil rights lawyer, could not stay at a hotel in downtown DC in the 50s.
This building was extremely important, especially for African Americans traveling from the South here to DC with business on the Hill at Howard University, or perhaps they were doing research. In addition to regular families, a lot of times you had students or people who were traveling alone. And so this place became not only a place where they could stay, but where they could socialize.
So do you remember ever seeing the Green Book in stores in California or anything?
No, I never saw it in stores. I heard about it on the news and online, and that it existed, and now I really saw what it was and experienced it, and now it opened up a whole new life.
During segregation, when before a facility like this existed, okay, black families had to sleep in their cars.
So the community absolutely relied on each other to ensure that no one was out or having to sleep in a car necessarily. That also happened within southern spaces or anywhere within that Green Book space to ensure that Black people stayed safe and that Black people who had a space that they could rent out, even if it was just a sofa.
I've heard about the museum since it's been here. First opportunity that I've had to come and actually see the museum itself, but I'm always interested in the Black history based on the generations of Black people, what got started, what went on. We're not experiencing a lot of it ourselves, but we've heard about it. So the History Museum actually, I'm looking to get a more feel of it based on the museum and some of the things that we didn't actually know about. And already today I've learned about the Green Book. I had never heard of the Green Book. So that's one of the things that I picked up on today.
I'm only 56, so I don't have any experiences actually with the Green Book itself, but my parents are very familiar with, it's even before I saw the exhibit, of where you could go, where you were allowed to go as you transpired, but as you transgressed from one area to another. My dad was from Chicago, but he went to school in the South. And so when they traveled up through to the Midwest and to different areas in the North, they had to know where they could stop and eat. And so the Green Book was critical for their progress, for their safe progress.
Even the motels, I remember Howard Johnson's was segregated. And when they first integrated, it was only partially integrated. If you wanted to buy some ice cream, you had to go through the black door to buy ice cream, not the white door to buy ice cream. So everything was segregated.
Integration impacted the Magnolia House as well, okay? When Black folk were allowed to stay in white hotels, okay? And they built another hotel around the corner, okay? The competition would not allow Magnolia House to stay open, so it became a boarding house. But its history, its popularity in the near future, where we will be able to register guests to stay here. Okay. And I fondly say that when you leave the Magnolia House, then you're gonna cry because you gotta go.
The very existence of the Green Book and its massive utilization by African Americans during that period of history shows that we are resilient people, we are creative, we are innovative. Green Book was an innovation, not to accept racism, but to get around it.